This week on Dig Me Out.
It's a shame about rain in the stone under the dust. His name is still engraved. Some things need to go
With your hosts, Jason Zia and Tim Minichi.
Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And this episode is brought to you by that union. They voted for it and we deliver it. This is a union picked via the digmeoutpodcast.com submit an album page. And we had quite the battle, let's just put it that way, to get to this point. There was a lot of voting. There was a lot of discussion about which ones. It was a lot of, and I was involved. Let's just put it this way. And I am
You were stirring the pot?
I was stirring the pot, and I am thoroughly disappointed. Now I know what it feels like when your album makes it into the final four and you don't get the votes and you hate everybody.
That's right. Yep.
So here's what happened, Jay, for our February poll. As per usual, we had, I don't know, 18 albums. That's the thing. 9 albums in two different polls.
Yep.
And it got whittled down to 4, and then from 4 to 1. These are the albums that made it into our February list. So we had Mobile Estates by Citizen King, suggested by Willie Dillon. It's a Shame About Ray by the Lemonheads, suggested by Jeremy Amen. Uncle Anesthesia by the Screaming Trees, suggested by Eric Peterson. Feel the Darkness by Poison Idea, suggested by Gabriel Gutierrez. Make Yourself by Incubus, suggested by Richard Waterman. Urban Discipline by Biohazard, suggested by Larry Givens. Shoulder Voices by Roller Skate Skinny, suggested by Kyle Bittner. How to Make Friends and Influence People by Terror Vision, suggested by Ian Perry. And This Is Hardcore by Pulp, suggested by Martin. From that, the 2 winners, Lemonheads and Pulp. Honestly, if you told me who was going to win out of that, it was either going to be those 2, or maybe I thought Incubus might get it done.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was Lemonheads and Pulp. It made sense. Round 2. This is where it gets a little. There's a little bit more diversity here in terms of lesser known or stuff that's outside of our regular stuff that we talk about. Cyclone Rangers, Feel Nice, suggested by Willie Dillon. Concentration by the Machines of Loving Grace, suggested by Jeremy Amend. Another Damned Seattle compilation, Various, suggested by Eric Peterson. Crowbar, Odd Fellows Rest, suggested by Gabriel Gutierrez. Vulgar Display of Power, suggested by Pantera, suggested by Larry Givens.
Suggested by Pantera?
By Pantera, suggested by Larry Givens. Sorry.
Okay.
Until the End of the World, Various Artists, suggested by Jeremy Sturbank. 100% Freak by Alligator Gun, suggested by Justin Wexler. Self-Titled by Remy Zero, suggested by Laura Lodge. And then the one that should have won, Saltpeter by Ruby, suggested by me. That's right. I dropped an album into the hopper. It was already in there once and they didn't win. So I dropped it in again and said, vote for this or else. And guess what? They voted for it. Remy Zero and Saltpeter went to the final 4. So here's our final 4. Remy Zero, Pulp, Ruby, Lemonheads. Everybody knew what they had to do, and they did not do it. The Lemonheads won.
They're bad rebounders.
Lemonheads won with 44% of the vote, Ruby with 29, Pulp with 24, Remy Zero with 2%. To be fair, we've already talked about Remy Zero on this show. Long time ago, we did Villa Lane. So I don't feel so bad about that. We've never talked about Lemonheads, Pulp, or Ruby.
You could join at the board of directors level and just make your own
I am the
annual
board of
pick.
directors.
No, no, you're just like an employee.
Oh, is
Not
that
an
what it
employee,
is?
but like you're under their direction. They oversee you.
Okay. Well, I lost.
They can fire
And
the CEO.
Jeremy Amen. First of all, we are not a publicly traded company. There's no shareholders that are going to be allowed to oust me. This is a privately held company.
And privately held companies still have boards.
Yeah, but they're not going to, they can't get rid of me.
Tim, don't piss them off.
Okay.
Can your ass.
So Lemonheads one, Jay. I know you're familiar with the Lemonheads. Have you actually listened to like a full Lemonheads album, or are you just familiar with the singles? Like, what's your
I
history?
think just the singles. I remember the Mrs. Robinson video, and I remember Into Your Arms. And then I just heard other stuff in passing over the years, but don't remember ever really putting on a full record and really digging into it. How about you?
Yeah, I'm actually fairly familiar with this record. This was one that our friend Keith had, and I listened to it over a summer along with a bunch of other CDs in rotation. I was familiar. So this came out in 92, but I really didn't get into the Lemonheads until later in the decade. Like I was not on aware of them until Into Your Arms, and was just like, oh, that's a nice single. And then probably like 96, 97 is when I actually started listening to them. So I did know this record. The original release does not include Mrs. Robinson. That was included as a bonus track on later versions of the album. The original record just has the 12 songs that are on the record. And then
Yeah, I
there,
was
so
confused when that video was out. What was that for, a soundtrack or something?
yeah, so I want to say that it was because it was a compilation or something.
Yeah,
I don't really remember the exact reason. Probably
I always
should
thought it
know
was on
that.
this album, and then I got started listening to the record, and I have the 30th anniversary edition, which includes it on disc two. But it took me a minute to like process it. Oh, it's not actually on this record.
It was the 25th anniversary of The Graduate, which that song was
Yeah.
written for. And so it was recorded, I guess, for the promotion of that for the 25th anniversary. And it was also used in Wayne's World 2, which came out in 93. So the year after this album came out. And then it was also used in The Wolf of Wall Street, which I don't remember it being in The Wolf of Wall Street, but apparently was in that movie. So it makes sense because the original version of the original album in 92 didn't have it. And then it's in Wayne's World the next year. So they're like, let's slap it onto the ends of the album so that people can get the song. And so this record, as mentioned, came out in 92 on Atlantic. It was produced by the Robb Brothers. I'm not that familiar with the Robb Brothers, but apparently they worked with, they were a band in the 1960s, and they did some production work later on. The Go-Go's, Jane's Addiction, Steely Dan, Aerosmith, Lenny Kravitz.
It's a pretty diverse group of people.
Yes. So the Lemonheads had a lot of turnover in their lineup. For this album, it's Evan Dando, who's the ever present. He's basically the Lemonheads.
He's the lemon head.
He's the head. He's the head
the main
lemon.
head. There you go.
Guitar and vocals. Juliana Hatfield is bass guitar and backing vocals.
Oh,
Yes.
I did not know that.
David Ryan is the drummer, and I think this might be the only album that David Ryan plays on. I'm not sure if he played on the next album, which is Come On Feel the Lemonheads. but he did not play on Car Button Cloth, which is the third album. No, not the third album. This is their fifth album. That's their Lemonhead. Come on, Feel the Lemonheads is their sixth album. Anywho, so those are basically the three main players on the record. Fun fact, the slide guitar that appears on the song Hannah and Gabi was played by none other than Jeff Skunk Baxter, the legendary Sessions guitar player who played in Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and Spirit and a whole bunch of other ones. You know, he's the dude with the mustache.
Yeah, of course.
So we got a Skunk Baxter reference on this show, which I don't think we've ever had. It might be, maybe not, maybe we've made reference to him in joke or in humor, but this is him literally playing on the album.
No joke.
What was it? Oh, so the bass on Mrs. Robinson was played by Nick Dalton, who Nick Dalton was in the Lemonheads before this, but he was not actually in the band at this time. So it was like, I don't know if they recorded that cover earlier or what the deal was, but let's get into some of the comments over from the Patreon where the people talk about the albums, what they voted for, what they went with. So Joe Rowland said, I really like all these. However, I got to go with the Lemonheads, an essential album listen for me in 92, 93. I still go back to it most out of the four. That said, I'll be happy if any of these win. Phil Hampton said, I voted for the Lemonheads probably because it's my all-time top 10, but also to hear discussion around how the band's style developed from their earlier albums to this. Jim Company said, well, I'm curious to hear y'all chat about the Dark Turn Pulp Took. That Lemonheads LP is a stone cold 110% classic album. Jeremy Ed said, assuming Lemonheads win, which version of the album will be reviewed? I feel like the later pressings with Miss Robinson can be ignored. It's probably their best known track from the album and least merits digging out. Plus, the original album is under 30 minutes, which is rare for a 90s album. Although this is 92, the bloat had not set in quite as deeply as it would later on. Willie Dillon said, I'm curious to hear about the Lemonheads album because only having heard one song from the next album, they seemed a bit milquetoast, but a lot of people seem to like them. Everybody else talked about other albums. So a little history on the Lemonheads. I know they're kind of a well-known band.
History of the band.
They're from the Boston area. They formed actually in the 80s. It was Evan Dando, Ben Daly, and Jesse Peretz. Now, they met at school, friends in school, and they ended up recording a 7-inch together. That lineup wouldn't stay together, and there's been a lot of people through. Jesse Peretz ended up becoming a director. He's directed movies and TV. I don't know if you remember this, but around the time when they started to break through, Evan Dando was named by I want to say it was people like the 50 most beautiful people list. Remember, People magazine would do that.
Yeah. I'm sure they still do.
Which I don't think he was a fan of. The first three albums with, I think it's those two, Dando, Daly, and Peretz, were released pretty quickly, like 87, 88, 89. Hate Your Friends was released on Tang Records in 87, and that's like a hardcore record. Like that's a loud hardcore record. Creator came out the following year, 88. That's like a hardcore punk record. Lick came out in 89, and that's when they started to slow it down a little bit, introduce some, I guess you'd say, more pop elements to the band. Mm-hmm. It's also, I don't remember, do you remember this? They scored a minor hit because they did a cover of Luca by Suzanne Vega. It got some radio play, or not. I don't know if it was radio play, but it got them some recognition. And then Lovey in 90 is sort of like the first one where they go full into the jangle pop sound that they would kind of be known for. And that has a couple covers on it. Like there's a Graham Parsons cover of Brass Buttons, and there's another one on there, I'm not sure, but Clay Tarver from Chavez appears on that record. Again, it's Boston. A lot of these bands crossover with each other, like Juliana Hatfield being in this band. Evan Dando was briefly in the Blake Babies with Juliana Hatfield. So there's a lot of crisscrossing. John Strom, who was in the Blake Babies, plays on a later Lemonheads album. So, like I said, there's a lot of crossover with regards to these with the Boston bands. This album made it to number 33 in the UK and number 68 on the US album chart. It is a US gold album. The follow-up, Come On Feel the Lemonheads, made it to number 56 in the US and number 5 in the UK. That's also a gold record. Singles, Into Your Arms, I didn't realize this, went to number 1 on the US modern rock chart. And it went to number 67 overall on the US chart. Went to 14 in the UK. For this album, It's a Shame About Ray. That song made it to number 5 on the US modern rock chart. It did not chart on the regular chart. And Miss Robinson made it to number 8 on the US modern rock chart, and number 118 on the overall chart. For Car Button Cloth, well, that has a bunch of people on it. Royston Langdon is on that album from Space Hog. Just
Why not?
why not? And at one point, he made a record with 2 of the guys from the Descendants as the Lemonheads, which is totally not what we expect to be, at all. Also, I didn't realize this, but there's a song on the Lemonheads, Come On Feel the Lemonheads album called Rick James Style.
Yep.
Which I just thought was, it was just a fun name. No, Rick James actually sings backing vocals on that song. Like, what? Yeah. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. Belinda Carlisle is also on that record. Again, what? He has
makes
a weird
more sense than Rick James, but
I guess, but I mean, it's just, he's got a lot of weird collaborators and strange people showing up on records and that you would not expect. So let's get into it. This is a new record for you, Jay. So tell me what works for you on It's a Shame About Ray by the Lemonheads.
it's a lot of good songwriting. The song craft here is pretty solid. These are tight, very tight, consistently strong songs from the get to the end. I like also the production choices they made here for these types of songs. It really, I think, helps appreciate the songs but not overpower them. There's a really unique mix of acoustic and electric guitars in this album that I can't quite find a parallel for. It's just a really unique blend, which doesn't always work. It's hard to do that well, I think. And they do it really exceptionally well in this album, where you get that richness and the strummy tone of the guitar, of the acoustic guitar, but then it's in there. There's still a little oomph. There's still a little something grit, which I think really serves these songs well. It's the right tone for them. It kind of keeps their acoustic origins in some degree, but then allows it to go in some pretty fun, unexpected places. I love how the guitars, the electric guitars, are then brought in for key moments too. It's almost opportunities for hooks from the guitars themselves on top of the vocals. A lot of memorable choruses here and melodies. I really like the dynamics too. They do an excellent job of, even though there's just short, concise songs, there's a lot going on here where, like, there's tempo changes, there's dynamics twists, there's chord progressions that don't always end in the same chord. Little subtle things where they're just constantly like keeping you on your toes, just when you think where the songs are going, which is tough thing to do if you're writing a song that's under 2 minutes and you're like, okay, I got the gist of the hook, you're going to play the chorus 3 times, the verse twice, but they just do enough, dropping in little things here and there, chord changes, dynamic shifts, tempo shifts, bringing in guitar riffs or builds that work really well, and just ending on the production again. It's also unique not only from the way the guitars are done, but also it's a warm production that's very like forward. So it's, the drums are kind of in your face, but not obnoxious. The bass is there. Everything is really easy to hear and forward in the mix, but it doesn't sound and kind of warm and organic, but it doesn't sound necessarily like a room. Like you can tell it's a multi-tracked, layered production, but it doesn't, that has a lot of warmth to it, but it doesn't, usually you would think that that will have like a band in a room sound, but it doesn't really have that. It has this really unique production sound to it that, again, I think serves these songs really well. Like it does enough to support them, but it also like introduces all of these little layers and flavors. There's organ that pops in, there's the pedal steel that pops in, there's some guitar leads that got quite a bit of distortion on them, but they're super melodic. Like they can drop in a lot of background vocals that are cool. They can drop in all these additional layers, and it seems to always fit and have a place and grabs your attention.
I don't mean to bring you down. I'm not one tripping around. Kinda hoped you wouldn't blame me. I can't wake up every day and find the same me. You can scream, but I'll just dream how you might disappear. All I know is it's never clear. I can't hold you near. You just are not here.
So yeah, these are really well-crafted songs, and I think a production that's just spot on for what this band is about and how they write songs and presents them in their best light. What worked for you?
Well, this record's always confounded me because it sounds so simple. These don't sound like really complicated songs, but there is a magic to this recording. It is the perfect combination of acoustic and electric that they somehow, I guess they recorded this really fast, which is what's interesting. They did the whole thing in like 10 days, which is wild to me,
Yeah.
especially for a major label. Like a major label signs you expecting you to take all this time and money and stuff like that. And the only thing they spent money on was the producers. They got these guys who had worked with some big names, but they did the thing real quick. And I did read that because the producers were well known, that's how they were able to get Skunk Baxter. And when he showed up to play his slide part, he pulls out a gun and puts it on the control panel because he was always carrying a gun on him. Because he's just a wild, like West character. Like he is. And Evan Dando was like, okay, man. But like there is such a, it's hard to capture cool, but there's a laid back coolness about this album where it just sounds like a dude strumming his guitar, and every once in a while there's a cool guitar, like you said, like there's something electric that'll come in here and there, whether it's the beginning of Rock and Stroll has like a riff that if you just isolate that little riff, that sounds like a hard rock band. And then when it kicks in, then you're like, oh, this is completely different than I'm expecting. And there's a couple of moments like that where you go, oh, well, this isn't just a dude this isn't a singer-songwriter, is what I'm saying. Like, this isn't just a guy strumming G and D and E. Like, he's got some tools in his chest that he breaks out very sparingly, but they're very well done. He's got such a good ear for melody, and he's able to capture. There's a lot of these songs don't have a ton of words. He just repeats a lot of things, but he does it in different ways where he'll say the same thing even from verse to chorus, but he'll change the melody, he'll change how he's delivering it, and it provides a whole new sound, which is fascinating. And like you said, these songs are fast. I mean, there's not a single song other than, I mean, the cover, we're going to disregard that because it's not on the original record, but the longest song is 3:20. And probably half of these songs are like under 2.5 minutes, which is wild for a 12 song record in 1992. There's a lot of really nice touches. The organ in Buddy, which is really called My Drug Buddy. That's the name of the song. But I think on some services, it's just Buddy, because that's not kosher to say My Drug Buddy.
On Apple Music, it's My Drug Buddy.
Okay. I guess some people have updated
well,
that.
It's the remastered version. So
that's probably why. But there's just smart little touches. And then having Juliana Hatfield, who's got the sweet voice in comparison to Evan Dando's voice, is just like, anytime anybody's ever talked about like, man, I'd really like have a male singer with a female, either someone to sing duet with or counter melody or just harmonize with, like, this is what you point to. This is just like perfect combination of voices. They go so well together. Everything about this record works for me, really.
It's not overdone either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she drops in these discrete places where it keeps it just gives you another wrinkle, another thing to kind of grab onto. But it's not like they're doing the whole album as duets or something, right? It's just like, it's another example of like dropping it in at the right time, and then doesn't have to be there always. I think that's what, it's hard to make that work, right? Some of the elements they're dropping in here, like the organ, that pedal steel, her vocal, those are hard to figure out. Like, how do I introduce those ideas into the record without like blowing it up or making it sound weird, right? It's like, because it's a pretty consistent bed, they're working from here, the same drum sound, the same guitar sounds. It can be a challenge to introduce new things to that, where it doesn't sound like it came out of left field. But they pulled off.
I'm too much with myself. I won't be someone else. I'm too much with myself. I won't be someone else. I'm too much with myself. I won't be someone else. So take off out the oldest door. Walk until it's light outside. Like before when we were on the phone. We have to laugh to look at each other. We have to laugh 'cause we're not alone.
It's also interesting that, I mean, they pull this off as a 3-piece. I know in the studio things sound a little bit different. It's his voicings that are interesting to me, like Rudderless, the main riff in that song, that dun, 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 that's such an interesting, those are chords, and I'm like trying to figure them out. I'm like, that's weird.
They're a little bit angular. There's something going on there.
And he uses, that's again, you mentioned dynamics. Like, that song has a lot of dynamics. A lot of these songs have more dynamics than you would expect from a jangle pop. Like, when I tend to think of jangle pop, I tend to think, big strummy 12 string, birds, that kind of thing. He keeps it just raw enough. Like, Alison Starting to Happen has the little bit of like the punk influence with the double time drums in part of that song. But even then, I mean, that song is under 2 minutes. It's got a nice like swing to parts of the song. And then there's like this percussion bridge part with ooze that you're just like, there's so much packed, and yet it doesn't feel like they're throwing everything at the kitchen, everything but the kitchen sink at you. It feels like they just found here's like one thing we can do interesting in this song, and or here's another thing. And
The jingle stuff too tends to get old really quick. It's hard for me to keep focus and stay interested in a record that's a traditional kind of jangle pop record. So they just did, I don't know. There's something about this album, like they tone that down. Like it's still there at the heart of what's going on, but they let it kind of recede and let other things come in. You know, I think it helps that the drums are mixed pretty loud. You know, they
yes,
let the rhythm take over. They let the guitars kind of not strum so much. You know, they're not overly playing. You know, they're I don't know. There's just a tastefulness here and a craft to how you do a jangle pop record without it becoming stale and predictable and boring.
I also like, and you mentioned the drums. There are loud. They're not simple per se, but he doesn't go to a lot of like big fills, and like it's a very like
Yeah,
it sounds like a small kit. Like he's it's snare, you know, kick, hi hat, maybe like some rack toms occasionally, but like it is it's pretty tight.
yeah.
Even though he's matching all the dynamic stuff.
There's some like tasty little fills here and there. Right, it's nothing bombastic, but it's like everything is very well placed and tasteful. There is a really cool in Allison's starting to happen. The way they play the last verse. This is another thing they do. Like, I think that's a good sounds a good example. I think they play every verse a little bit different musically.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, the drummer goes to this variation of the beat that brings a tom in, and it has this like rollicking kind of feel to it. And it's when he delivers the line, "This world is topsy turvy," and it right away matches up. It like, you know, they're playing this verse where the lyric is talking about, you know, things becoming chaotic, and then all of a sudden the band doesn't sound over the top chaotic, but there's like this rumble in the drums, and like all of a sudden this different groove that comes out that's, you know, we're expressing what the lyric is expressing in that third verse. I'm like, that's brilliant. Like
Mm-hmm.
that didn't just happen. Like that's, I mean, somewhere within the 10 days of doing this that occurred to them, but like, you know, that was designed of like, hey, I'm going to, you know, get a little loose here on the drums so that I match the lyric and this all works better. It's all very well crafted. It's did not expect that. I expected it to be a lot of jangly acoustic stuff, but with some stuff layered on. I didn't expect the rest of the band and the rest of the production to be this cohesive.
Alison started to happen. Alison started to happen. Alison started to happen. To me. This world is topsy-turvy, and it is mine to eat. She's a pebble in my mouth, and underneath my feet. She's a puzzle piece behind the couch, made the sky complete. Alison's starting to happen. Alison's starting to happen. Alison's starting to happen. Alison's starting to happen.
You also get into the songs pretty quickly. Like usually
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not more than twice through a progression. You know, sometimes a lot of times you would get like you get one of the guitar, and then the band would come in, and then you do like two more. It might be a lead,
Mhm.
or you would get like it would start with the bass, or it would start with, you know, like, there's always like a reason to keep waiting for that verse to start. And this one, they're like, boom, let's get into it. Like one time through the progression or two times through the progression, you got it. The song is starting. There's very few times where there's dead space in the songs where there's not at least a vocal or an other instrument. I like even just like, I think I'm just in Rock and Stroll. There's like a Hammond that gets hit. It's just like once,
Yep.
and that's all you need. Like just that one little extra punch of the Hammond
Yeah.
at one time in the song, and it's, you know, it could have, you could have, you know, John Lorded all over that thing, but thank God they were
Yeah.
like very economical in where they used things. I also like that you can hear his appreciation of 70s, or excuse me, of like 60s birds, flying burrito brothers. He's got the right voice for it. Like he's got
Yeah.
that deep kind of voice when he can sing, you know, a little bit higher, but then he can bring his voice down, and it's perfect for that, you know, slide pedal steel sounding song.
Yeah. I noticed that his lower range sounds to me a little bit like Elvis Costello, but then he
Mm-hmm.
can move out of that really easily and suddenly feel totally comfortable in something that's got some twang to it and almost sound country, which
Yep.
is pretty remarkable. I didn't realize he was that capable as a singer, I guess from the singles I'd heard, that just how fluidly he can move around and just kind of fit the song perfectly.
And then he's able to deploy nice harmonies with himself, which
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
again, they very tastefully, and I have to give it up for the Rob brothers, because I mean, I'm imagining they're, you know, steering a little bit in the studio with their experience, that they just find like the exact right spot to like, here's where we're going to dump that that, you know, that harmony, or this is where we're going to double this, and it's really going to punch this second time through. Because like you said, a lot of times you get to the second time through a verse and it changes. They
Yeah.
very rarely stick to the same. It's not, you know, second verse same as the first. Like
Yep.
Rudderless does that. There's like a change in the way he plays, the drums play, and it's just a, it's
One
kind
of
of
the
a
songs he sings maybe the choruses. He goes up an octave the next time he sings the
mhm.
chorus. And he's always changing things up. That just to me feels like also what an experienced producers would bring, right? It'd
Right.
be not only telling you what to do, but what not to do. Like, hey, this part needs this. Okay, do it. Okay, that's it. We got it. Move on. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It feels like also inspired in that way. Like it's not overproduced. It's not overthought. It's not sort of, you could say like, oh, let's bring our pedal steel on. Well, we got the pedal steel player here. Let's have him play on everything. No, 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 no. They didn't do that. They're like, we just want
Right.
it for this song, this part. You're good. Okay, take off. We're moving on. You
Yeah.
very much get a sense of like they knew exactly what they wanted to do with these songs and didn't overindulge.
Yep. Is there anything that doesn't work for you on the record?
The, I mean, nothing major. The middle feels a little like a lull to me. By Drug Buddy, I love the organ in that. I kind
Hmm.
of like the idea of the
Sounds
album
like
coming
Dirty Work,
down.
that organ
Mm,
by Steely
yeah,
Dan.
yeah. Well, Skunk Baxter played in Steely Dan too.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
We're gonna have to get to Steely Dan at some point in this podcast. I've never listened
they,
to a whole Steely Dan album, by the way.
I haven't either. Were they busy in the 90s?
I don't know. Now I gotta look that
Uh,
up.
so the middle to me just drops for a moment, and I don't mind that it drops, but it's just not as strong. My Drug Buddy feels a little oasisy. The turnpike down, tempo kicks back up. It's it's fine. It's a little jangly on the jangly side. So it's a bit of a lull, and then it picks up for me again with bit part, and then the rest of the album just is stellar again. So it's like starts off super strong, lulls for a track or two, and then picks up again. Um, to finish out in what was it, less than 30 minutes. So can't nitpick a lot. I'm not going to say like drop those songs. They're not. And I wouldn't even skip them, but I did notice myself like fading a bit on those two tracks. Anything not work for you?
I just, some of the material at the end isn't as strong. Frank Mills is actually a cover, but Ceiling Fan of My Spoon is not my. I wouldn't say it's one of the better songs on the record. It's fine, but I think the album. I do agree with, like, maybe it lulls a little bit at times, but it's a really short record, and it just pops. I mean, it's just like it's it just jumps off the speakers. How and which is so interesting for what is essentially, like you said, a jangle pop record, which is sort of be a little bit more washy and a little bit more um
Yeah, it's
uh
not washy at all.
no, it's the opposite.
It's dry and like forward.
It's like if Bob Mould made a jangle pop record.
Yeah. Yeah. There was actually like at least one song in here I had a Bob Mold. I think bit part I had a Bob Mold note on, just the chord choices very much reminded me of him.
I want a bit part in your life, rehearsing all the time. I just want a bit part in your life, little more than a cameo, nothing dramatic when I go. I want a bit part in your life. A walk on would be fun. I just want a bit part in your life. I want a bit part in your life. Rehearsing all the time. I just want a bit part in your life.
Yeah, that could easily be a Sugar song, like an acoustic Sugar song. By the way, Steely Dan did not have an album out in the 90s, but Donald Fagen released Kamakiriad, which had the single Snowbound, which, yes, 1993 Tim enjoyed that song Snowbound on VH1. I don't know if you remember that video or not, but that was my introduction to Steely Dan. That's when I would watch VH1 for like Harry Connick Jr.,
Oh
Simply
my God.
Red.
Stop. People are turning this podcast off. You just lost all credibility.
So this was, I mean, at the time, this was pretty much either a 8 or a 9 out of 10 record. Like I can't find a single bad review from when this came out, and it's considered the pinnacle of the Lemonheads career.
Yeah.
Because the next album, while I remember that one quite well, and Car Button Cloth, it's a long record and the songs got longer. It's like a little bloated in that respect. And this one is, I mean, it's 29 minutes. You just rip through it so fast. It's hard to complain about it.
Seems like they captured some magic here.
Yes. Yeah, it really does.
With the right people at the right time.
And it's not overdone. Like, they did 10 days, knocked it out, had the right producers. Everybody's, talk about Evan Dando. I mean, this is his 5th album, and he had been doing this since the mid 80s. So, I mean, he had developed as both a singer and a songwriter. He didn't have to be screaming in a hardcore punk band anymore. He could start to, like he did on the previous record, Lovey, start to incorporate his appreciation for, singer songwriters of, I guess you'd say, the Laurel Canyon. Is that where the Birds were from? No, were the Birds Laurel Canyon, or is that where I'm thinking?
Yeah.
Okay. Which, that was not something that you heard a lot of 90s bands talking about, was like Laurel Canyon singer songwriters.
Right.
It was really the era of bands more so than singer songwriters, until, probably halfway through the decade when Jeff Buckley shows up. So, so let's get to our overall ratings on this record. Worthy album, better EP, or decent single?
Worthy album. I was pleasantly surprised here based on the singles. I thought I knew this band. And after listening to you talk about the discography, I'm not sure that I think the rest of the catalog probably better fits what my conceptions were. This is total shocker. It's if we were doing a 10 scale, it'd be a 10 out of 10 for me. Where are you at?
Same. I mean, this to me is one of the unsung heroes of the 90s. Like, this album deserves to be mentioned with some of the best albums of the 90s that don't, because they're not the ones. This didn't sell 12 million copies or whatever, but honestly, like, front to back, it's hard to find albums from that era that can stack up the way that this one does.
It's
It's also
so
just
accessible too.
yeah,
Like it's I can't believe this wasn't bigger. It's so easy to get into, and it's not, it's got energy and it's got some grit here and there, but it's a very easy listen.
and the only thing I can think of is that he was a little self-destructive
Yeah.
with drugs and other stuff, and he kind of torpedoed his career a couple
Yeah.
times because of that. And I don't know if you remember this, but like even in the 2000s, when there was talk of him doing solo tours, like it was like you were watching a disaster happen. Like, is he going to show up? Is he going to be high on stage?
Mhm.
Like, it was kind of a wreck for when he was doing his first solo album, which I think is called Baby on Board.
Yeah.
And he just, you were like watching a train wreck.
Yeah.
I think he has gotten in a better place since then. He's had the Lemonheads putting records out, and it's been active and touring and stuff. So, good for him if that's happening. But
Mhm.
yeah, this is 92 also. Like, think about, this has got to go up against Nevermind and Alive, and this is not quite, this is totally a college rock record. This is not a mainstream album because of that, because you're fighting off the last of like the Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi's that are still kicking around. Plus, you're adding Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains into the rock rotation.
Yeah, but this is right in that Goo Goo Dolls wheelhouse. It's because this
Yeah, but
doesn't
you're a
have a
couple
straight
years
up.
before that.
Yeah.
Like, Name is 94, right? 93, 94.
Yeah.
So this
I guess
this
there's
is
there's
just a little bit ahead.
yeah.
But yeah, it's always confounded me why, because everybody who likes this album loves this album.
Yeah.
Like, they're and again, that's why I discovered it, was because Keith gave it to me and he was like, this album's great. And I was like, really? The Into Your Arms, cheesy
Right.
acoustic song? I was like, okay. And it was with the Verve and Catherine Wheel and stuff like that. So
Yep.
big guitar records. And this is it's not a big guitar record in terms of volume, but in terms of stuff that's interesting and teaches you that you can be, I mean, you can play all these songs by yourself, and those dynamics are what make the song interesting, as
Oh
opposed to just
yeah.
strumming the chords up and down.
The double deluxe edition has a lot of these on acoustic as demos. So you can hear them. I mean, the parts are all there. They're
Yep.
just played with one guitar and acoustic.
It reminds me of and these are Boston bands, but like when you strip down like Uncle Buffalo Tom or Dinosaur Jr. songs to acoustic guitar, they still kind of work, like,
Yeah. Oh
because
yeah.
those guys are interesting guitar players.
Buffalo Tom was the other band that popped into mind.
Yeah.
Listen to this. There were moments where I could
Oh
definitely
yeah,
hear those.
definitely. All right, well, we need to thank all the folks who voted, and we need to thank Jeremy for suggesting this record. Very yeah, I know Jeremy was just on recently, so I'm very happy that he's got multiple wins going. We should be keeping track of who suggests what albums and how we rate them, to see over the years, like, who has the best track record in terms of submitting the albums to us. Be curious to know. Also, who has the best batting percentage of albums submitted versus albums picked. That's another one I'd like to know.
It gets strangely competitive.
Yeah. Well, imagine if we like said like the top one gets a hat and the bottom one gets kicked out of the union. Like the person with the worst percentage.
Relegation?
Yeah, we relegate them.
Ouch. Where would they
Yeah.
relegate to?
Um you get this, you only get to lurk on the Steve Hoffman forums. Sorry. You're off the Discord. Oh, that would be mean. I'm sorry. We're not going to do that. You're banned to all music. That's your entire day. It's just looking at out of date reviews and misaligned catalogs. So if you would like to suggest an album for one of these polls, you can go to digmeoutpodcast.com and click the suggest an album link. If you'd like to join the union, you can go to dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. Join the union, become a union member, and maybe you can submit an album for us
Maybe
to pick.
You just
Depending
join
on depending on
the
what
tier and just make
tier,
a pick.
yeah. Maybe you can do that. Let's see what you got. And Box newsletter is also what you can read at Patreon. It's where you go to learn about not only the new releases each week from 80s, 90s, and aughts relevant artists, books, movies, albums, obviously, documentaries, that kind of stuff. It's also where you can find the 80s metal podcast with album reviews every other week. And Apple Podcasts is where you go to leave positive feedback for the show. So for Jay, I'm Tim. We're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Dig Me Out.